You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from the Encore series, where we revisit past museum programs and conversations. Welcome to Precinct 444, a podcast network by the National Law Enforcement Museum. If you're listening for the first time, we encourage you to visit many of our other episodes to learn more about what we do through any major platform. Since March is the celebration of women's history, and on March 22nd is another special program honoring women in the law enforcement profession, it's timely to revisit The Female Force, Empowering Women in Law Enforcement, which originally aired in March of 2021. A link to register for the upcoming museum program titled Walking the Same Beat, the First Patrol of Women Officers, can be also found in the episode description. This episode begins with remarks from then NAWLEE President Paula Balafas and brief introductory remarks by moderator Kathy O'Toole. The five panelists are then asked about their inspiring careers in law enforcement, the hurdles they've faced, and advice for entering the field of law enforcement. And now for The Female Force, Empowering Women in the Law Enforcement Profession.
I just wanted to say on behalf of the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, our membership, our board of directors, we are so excited and pleased to be part of this session today. As you know, NAWLEE strives to lead, inspire, and mentor women in the profession of law enforcement. As we seek to increase the number of women in law enforcement, I'm so excited to announce that together with the Policing Project at the New York School of Law, several researchers and policy professionals will be helping us officially launch the 30 by 30 initiative, which aims to increase women in law enforcement from 13% to 30% by the year 2030. This is a one-of-a-kind initiative and really just the brainchild of some of the best thinkers in our profession. Several agencies, including my own agency, has made a signed commitment to be intentional in their efforts to evaluate their hiring process actively, to actively recruit and retain more women. The importance of diversifying the policing workforce cannot be overstated. For too long, our profession has been dominated by men, and we seek to change that paradigm. We are confident that this initiative will make a transformative difference in our profession. We invite everyone to watch our social media pages for additional information on our project page. In addition to this effort, NAWLEE is exceedingly proud of our mentoring program. Thanks to a very generous grant from the Motorola Solutions Foundation, NAWLEE has the resources to sustain a vibrant mentoring program. Interested members are matched with mentors aligned with their career goals, and agencies can go through training to create their own programs within their own agencies. Additionally, our grant through the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services has enabled us to increase our outreach and host webinars on a variety of topics. If anyone is interested in learning more, please contact us at info@NAWLEE.com. Additionally, another initiative that we're involved with is the Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center, or CRITAC for short. This is the field-by-field effort funded by the COPS Office and managed by IACP, and includes all of our partner organizations that probably are represented on this call as well. Also, just another housekeeping item, we're certainly excited to be planning for our 25th annual conference. As many of you know, last year we were unable to have that in person, and we're hoping that that happens this year, August 4th through August 7th in St. Louis, Missouri, and hosted by Chief of Police Don Lehman. If you give me just one more moment, you know that there's quite a lot going on with NAWLEE, and I don't mean to give any short shift to any of our programs, but just wanted you to be aware of some of the things that we have going on. I also would like to thank everyone who is here today, all of our members, all of the attendees, and we're just so pleased to have this group of women assembled here to share their backgrounds in policing and their efforts to make a difference in their communities. I know at the end of this session, you'll agree that this group truly embodies what women bring to the field of policing. We appreciate each of them taking time out of their busy schedules to come together with us and the National Law Enforcement Officers Museum and Memorial to talk with you today. It goes without saying that we are thrilled to have Commissioner Kathleen O'Toole, one of the real trailblazers in our field, here today and to moderate. I could not think of a better way to contribute to making this an amazing addition to Women's History Month.
I'm going to introduce our panelists today. We're not going to go into a lot of detail about our biographies. I think it's important, though, to learn a little bit about each person. I enjoy the personal stories behind the official biographies. The biographies, of course, appear on the website and also on the link to this event today. So I encourage you to take a look at the extraordinary careers of these rock stars that are serving on this panel today. And it's certainly my privilege to facilitate this discussion. We're actually going to break it into two segments. We want to hear from you too. We want to hear your comments and your questions. So we're going to encourage you to send those in. And we're going to do the first segment, then take some time to answer some questions and hear from some of you. And then next we'll go to the second segment and do the same. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in with us. First of all, I'd like to introduce Chief Gina Hawkins from the Fayetteville Police Department in North Carolina. Gina originally served in Georgia in most of her career before moving on to Fayetteville. So we'll hear more from her very shortly. Thank you, Chief Hawkins, for joining us today. Second, we have U.S. Marshal Sonia Chavez. Marshal Chavez is currently serving in New Mexico, had a very distinguished career in federal law enforcement before assuming that role. So I really appreciate the fact that you've taken time to join us today. Then Chief Jill Lees. Jill is at Indiana University at the police department there in the Bloomington division. She has a very interesting story of actually weaving in and out of the cadet program there prior to joining full-time and then rising through the ranks. Then Sheriff Rosie Rivera from Salt Lake County in Utah, where she's the first woman to serve as a sheriff and as I believe the only woman serving as a sheriff in Utah currently. Finally, we have Chief Roxana Kennedy from the Chula Vista Police Department in California, another extraordinary leader who's risen through the ranks. So again, it's my privilege, certainly my privilege, to facilitate this discussion. I think I'll start with Chief Hawkins. And again, Chief, I always joke with people, as I say, I took the job on a dare, and I love it when people ask me the balance question. You know, how did you balance being a career police executive with being a mom and a wife? And my answer is usually I didn't. You know, my daughter tells these horrific stories about how I forgot to pick her up at school on multiple occasions. And my husband always tells everybody when he wants to hide something on me, he puts it in the oven. So I haven't exactly been a domestic goddess. So we all have those interesting personal stories. But tell us a little bit about your own, personal experience in policing. What drove you into the business, and maybe a few anecdotes about your experience as you've risen through the ranks.
So thank you first, Commissioner O'Toole. Honored to be here. Honored to be here amongst everyone, and thank you for being on the panel. Just as you said, everyone's story is different, and I had to eat. So I didn't have plans to be in law enforcement. I actually wanted to be an attorney, and I took a break from school. So, and that was over 32 years ago. And you talk about the decision of balance. So after I was on the agency for about 3 years, I had my oldest daughter, who's 30 now, and I became focused in the balance question. I think I have 2 children now. My other one's 10 years later. I had to evolve. I talked about the balance in all that I do and everything that I've committed to. And the more I realized I committed to certain parts of my family, explaining what I do and why I'm doing it, because everything I do is connected to really my faith and living out my purpose. I just started explaining it to my daughters and my family of what I was doing, bringing them to events with the community. But at the same time, when the time came for they had events, I took the time out and said, I've got to go. My schedule's busy. I'll see you later. I've got to run to a basketball game, a soccer game, a recital, a graduation, whatever it may be. So I stretched myself a little bit, but like you said, there is no balance. But that's what I am. That's what I do. Um, Everything who I am evolves in my personal and professional life. So I got into this. I didn't get into this to law enforcement because I had never been exposed to law enforcement. But I this is I love my job. I absolutely love my job. It fits with who I am. I love people. I love due process. I love the Constitution. I love doing the right thing and making sure people learn and grow. So I think that's how I got in this profession.
Yeah, thank you for that story. That's a great story. I think that inspires people. I know very early on, I discovered too that policing is truly a vocation. It's not just a job,
Yeah,
and that while it's exciting to run around and um, to 911 calls and arrest people who are hurting others, uh, that most of it is providing service to vulnerable people.
that's right.
And so I really appreciate your commitment to that. Um, Marshall Chavez, thank you so much for joining us. I love the fact that we have a group that goes across federal, local, um, county, and university law enforcement. This panel represents very, very diverse perspectives, but would love to hear about the challenges you faced uh, personally and professionally as you rose through the ranks of federal law enforcement.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm so honored and humbled to be here with all of you today. And when I think about sharing my law enforcement story, we all have our silly stories about how we got here. And in essence, I didn't plan a career in law enforcement. I was enamored with the New Mexico State Police as a young girl. I grew up in a very, very small town in New Mexico, and with brothers only. I'm the only daughter. And I asked my dad, you think I could be a New Mexico State police officer? And the very traditional, conventional daddy said, absolutely not. So fortunately for me, I was lucky enough to be inspired by some amazing people, and I pursued a career in journalism. So I went to state school here and got a journalism degree and moved away to Texas for a few years. And I did that before returning back to New Mexico. And fast forward several years to the age of about 30, and I started to learn to play golf, and was paired up with a salty old FBI agent and on the golf course. And so that's how I got recruited for the FBI. So I tell that story because I didn't plan the career that I've been blessed to have in law enforcement. I went into the FBI office a few weeks later to ask a few questions, and walked out of there saying, sign me up. And so 10 months later, I was at Quantico and got assigned to Chicago field office, which was unexpected. But what do? You embrace it and you say, I'm beginning the biggest adventure of my life. And it was. And so, little did I know that at the end of my FBI career, I would be fortunate to be appointed as a U.S. Marshal for my home state. And it has been such an honor. The challenges are great, but the privilege overshadows that every day. And I know that all of my colleagues here would echo that. We're so fortunate to have the honor to serve our communities and to serve our state the way we do. So I guess my message is, I didn't plan this career at all. I'm grateful to the people who coached me and cultivated me and encouraged me. The balance that we talk about, I say I found it after 20 years and I'm never going back, but it really is a challenge every day with children. My children are now 21 and 19. And yeah, I was one of the moms that wasn't doing the baked goods. I'd go to the fancy bakery and get the baked goods and put them on a pretty plate and pretend. My daughter and I laugh about that now, and I remind her we do other things. It's okay if we're not good bakers. It's okay, but it's been an absolute adventure, and it still is every day.
That's a great story. Thank you very much for sharing that. So far we're 3 for 3. None of us so far ever intended to become police officers. How about you, Chief Lees? I understand that you made your decision a bit earlier in your career.
I did, but I didn't know at that point in high school. Picture me as a sophomore in high school, just sitting in class. I get called up to the teacher's desk, and he said, "Hey," he goes, "I think you would be a really good and really interested to go to our Indiana State Police career camp, and we'll pay for it." And I'm like, "Absolutely." I came from kind of a different environment, and didn't really have the money to go to a camp like that in another part of the state. And when I got there, that's when I was dialed in, laser focused, and that's when the light bulb went on of this is what I want to do the rest of my career. And I was so fortunate that Lieutenant Roop from Indiana University Police Department was there talking about our cadet program. And I said, that's it. I mean, I didn't even know if I was going to go to college. I'm a first generation college student. And I said, that's it. I'm going to Indiana University and I'm going to join the cadet program. And from that moment on, I was driven to succeed to that. When I got to IU, I was very fortunate enough to get hired onto our cadet program, which is a very unique program in the country where we train students to become police officers and run our own police academy. And then the second year of that program, you actually work as a part-time campus officer alongside the full-time officers. So you not only graduate with a diploma and get a degree from a fine Big Ten university, you also receive your state certification through our Indiana Law Enforcement Training Board. So it was a great opportunity for me then to springboard to the Plainfield Police Department, where I served almost 24 years. I was able to do many different things in my career in law enforcement. But I always said I wanted to come back. I always said I wanted to come back to IU. And when the chief's position opened in late 2018, I applied for it. And here I am today. And I am so blessed every single day to be back at IU. I really enjoy this environment. I enjoy having the academy. And I enjoy helping to mentor that next generation of law enforcement here.
Well, we really appreciate that. We look forward to hearing more about the unique characteristics of campus law enforcement, particularly during these challenging times. Thank you for joining us today. Sheriff Rosie Rivera in Salt Lake County, tell us about your position out there. Very interesting. First woman to serve as a sheriff in Utah, very conservative state, I understand. What's your experience been?
So as sheriff, it's been really unique working in the state of Utah as the first female sheriff, but there's really not many women in leadership positions here in Utah. We have a female chief out of West Valley City, and then one sheriff who is female. And when I've always wanted to be a police officer since I was 7 years old. So it took me a little while to get here. And I was surprised at the lack of women in law enforcement. So one of my initiatives has always been to increase more women and diversity into the profession. I think it's really important. I was a young mother at the age, I got pregnant at the age of 14 and had my first child at 15. And I know the challenges for women to pursue their dreams. And so I try to help mentor and encourage and support all women, not just women officers, but also our civilian staff. They're very important to our law enforcement community as well. So that's what my challenge is. I run 2 separate departments, Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office, and then also Unified Police Department. I'm the CEO of the police department here as well. So it's a unique position, and I love every minute of it. And I feel grateful that I have the opportunity.
Great story. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Sheriff. And last but not least, certainly, we have Chief Rosanna Kennedy. Thank you so much, Roxana, for joining us today. Please tell us a little bit about your adventure. And
So I'm
what
hearing
brought
a theme as we continue having this conversation, that, and the same happened for me, that women do not see themselves in the role as a, first off, a police officer or a deputy, but also in a leadership role. And so I came from a business background, never expecting to ever be in law enforcement. I ran multiple businesses. They were wholesale retail flower businesses. So you can imagine when I started here that I had a lot of jokes about Guns N' Roses, without a doubt. But really, for me, when I was in business, and I have a greater respect for people in business because it's very, very difficult. And you can only imagine right now. But customer service was what was always important to me when I was in business. And when I had some challenges in business, I had to start working with police agencies. I had some embezzlements and everything you can imagine when you're in business. And so I had to do these very detailed reports. And I had this one female officer say to me, after she's reading them and looking through it, and she said, "Man, you would be a really good cop." And when she said that to me, I call it the nudge. I started to say, wow, you think I could be a good cop? And I started putting myself in that role and seeing myself there. And it ended up where I put myself through the police academy and started applying. I was first going to be, we used to have marshals in the court systems. And I thought, oh, I could work Monday through Friday, and then I could still have my time to run my business on the weekends. And what happened is I fell in love with law enforcement. And I ended up starting at Chula Vista Police Department as an officer in a very male dominated environment. And I've had tremendous experiences throughout that career, but I learned one thing. You have to help people see themselves in this position. You have to sometimes bring them into your office and say, take a seat in the chief's chair, because one day that could be your chair. And it also encouraged me to tell my officers that I'm the first internal chief in 67 years in my department, and the first female chief of police. So as I've had the conversation with people, they've had an opportunity to see that you never know where your career is going to lead, but it's how you treat people and what you do with those positions that can lead others there. So I love my job, and it's been difficult having a family. I have 3 children, but they have all now, they didn't want to be a police officer, though. I tried as hard as I could. And when my son said he wanted to be a firefighter, it broke my heart, I have to tell you, but he's in public service. And my daughter is an ICU nurse that actually has dealt with a lot right now with COVID. So we do have a family of service dedicated to helping people.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you very much, Chief. Oh, let me ask you this, though. There had to be some obstacle, some barrier along the way. Could you share that with us? And if so, how did you overcome that?
So when I first started here, I believe our numbers were down to like around 9 or 10% female in our department. And so it was challenging to work in a male dominated environment, but I looked at it, and I know some people are going to think this is strange, but I looked at it as a positive. I looked at it as an opportunity to stand out. I looked at the fact that I had to sit down and strategize and look at men and look at what these male leaders, how they worked and what their goals were. And so I really kind of flipped it and turned it out as a positive for me. I have, I think one of our panelists was saying that they have 3 other brothers. I have 3 brothers. They're all younger than me, though. So I learned to boss around men at a very early age. So it was very, very helpful, let me tell you. But I just started looking at, if I'm going to go into this interview, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to stand out because I'm a woman. So for me, I always made it a positive, even when people would make their comments, or, I have all the stories like probably everyone here does about going on a radio call and not getting covered and saying things to me like, oh, what would the female, I didn't pull the drugs off him because I wanted to see what the female officer would do after the individual already searched them. So why would I search them again, right? But I learned from that on how to be stronger, smarter, and more strategic. And when they wouldn't cover me on a call, or they would call me off on a call. I'd drive by to make sure all the officers saw me and knew that I knew exactly what they were doing. And I can tell you that one individual who I never held it against him, I just used it to empower me, had to one day come into my office to have a conversation with me, who was his lieutenant. So that's another thing that I say with people, and I did it with Grace, but I addressed it very candidly with him about how you treat people. And I think that's what it boils down to, that I always treated people with dignity and respect. I took the higher road, but I learned from my interactions with difficult people. The profession itself is hard enough, but to have some of the obstacles that we have to learn to be strategic in how we respond to some of these challenges. And so, I mean, we could probably have a whole show just on that alone. But I think that it's find another person you trust, male or female. It doesn't have to be a female. I have great male mentors, and learn how to be strategic in dealing with individuals that want to put roadblocks or obstacles in your way. And it takes a lot of tenacity and hard work. But I mean, I am no for the fact that I'm the chief of police, that I rose up the ranks within this organization, the first internal chief, gives hope to other people. And many women, we have 20%. I became the chief in December 30th, 2016. We were at 227 officers then. We're now at 275. And we went from a low number of like 10% of females, and we are at 20% right now. So that 30-30, we're going to be there for you. We promise that. And we all just have to unite and work together and strategize. That's my best advice.
Well, that's very good advice. I mean, you said so many insightful things during that response, but the one that really struck me a lot was that positivity, to really, exhibit that optimistic attitude. Not only do I think it helps you personally, but I think it's a great leadership quality as well. I think people really tend to follow optimistic, positive leaders. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Marshall Chavez, tell us about some of the obstacles that you faced, if any, and how you overcame them.
I got so excited there listening to Chief Kennedy, because I too feel, we have had obstacles and barriers, but I think a lot of it is how we choose to look at it. When I started my law enforcement career, with the FBI, it's a second career for everyone. So we all come from varied backgrounds. And I think one of my biggest challenges initially was not being overwhelmed or intimidated by the very impressive backgrounds and educations of all my colleagues. I was reminded by, one of my contemporaries early on. We all have the same job now, no matter where we went to school or what our background was. And it also reminded me that I did bring a unique dimension to the Bureau, having been a journalist, and I was a spokesperson for the governor of our state here in New Mexico. And I didn't realize at the time that was kind of a special type of background. I didn't have any military background or law enforcement background. But I think the biggest challenge is to humble yourself and tell yourself that you're there to learn, right? I thought that I would be assigned to a white collar squad because I was a very girly girl. That sounds silly, but you have these impressions of where they're going to place you. And in fact, they place you in the place that you will be the least comfortable. So they send me to Chicago and put me on a gang squad, inner city, with a bunch of Chicago cops and Illinois State police officers. And am I grateful for that? Because it just taught me so much. And so my challenge really was to be confident enough in who I was and what I brought, to just be quiet and try to learn everything that I could. I was fortunate to come in at a time surrounded by people who were really excited about what we were doing in the Bureau. And there was a big push to bring more women on. So I just felt like I was part of that. I didn't feel like there was anything particularly different or special about being a woman at the time. As I've come over to the Marshal Service, we have a lot fewer women here. We're at about 9%. So we have a huge initiative going on to recruit more lady deputies. And I feel privileged to be the point for that. Our director asked me about a year ago to lead that initiative. So I'm announcing right now, I'm stealing all your great people. But it's a wonderful opportunity to really share the story of how we can all be impactful by being ourselves. And I think that's a challenge that we all face every day, because we do normally find ourselves to be the only woman in the room. And, it's important not to separate ourselves, but just to remember that we bring an incredibly powerful dimension by being ourselves. And that to me is very exciting, very challenging. But that's, you all have experienced it. And I get excited just listening to your stories.
Yeah, I really appreciate the fact that both you and Chief Kennedy, cited situations where you actually turned a challenge into an opportunity. So I like that very much. I kind of reflect on some of those situations during my own career. How about you, Sheriff Rivera? What obstacles have you faced and how have you overcome them?
Well, some of the obstacles that I faced have been on, maybe I brought on myself. First of all, because I wanted to be a police officer at such a young age, and then becoming pregnant so young, that became one of my barriers. And in my mind, I still wanted to do what I wanted to do, but I saw that it was very difficult to raise a child that young. But I kept that dream going. And, I had a father who was very supportive and was one of my greatest mentors, who told me just go for it when you have the opportunity. So at 31 is when I joined or started the academy and got hired with the police agencies. And that was 28 years ago. So throughout the years, there have been some challenges and some barriers, but most of them were what I was telling myself. Because it is a male dominated field, and there were very few women. When I started the sheriff's office, there were only 9 women in the office. And that's a challenge when those 9 women are the ones that paved the way for me to be here where I am today. And then the other barrier becomes when you do become a leader in law enforcement. Here in Utah, it's been a challenge because there are no other women in leadership positions. So trying to break those barriers with the men that are sitting at the table with me, trying to get their respect has been difficult. It's been very challenging, but I can tell you all the sheriffs have been very, very supportive, but it's different for them too. And I encourage them to, be open-minded and understand that my voice matters. My voice matters not only to them, but everyone else, the whole community. And one of the things that I have learned from being part of the sheriffs is that my calmness, my temperament comes into play. I deal with a lot of individuals who are knee-jerk. And something that I've said along the way, not only am I educating them, but I do believe that I'm inspiring other women by being out there and speaking my voice. And it's been very, very helpful because I think it's important for women to see other women in those positions and understand that we have a place that is very important and we should be at the table. We have the right to be at the table and we have a right to be heard. And it's been very effective for me. And I was one of the founding members of the Utah Women in Law Enforcement Association. And we started that association because we noticed women were not getting promoted in rank. So we got together, we came up with an association, we started to educate, mentor, and support other women. And now we're seeing women coming through the ranks. And it was supporting other women and encouraging them and helping them through their barriers. So, what I've learned through the challenges I've had, I've shared with other women, and I think it's been very effective. It's interesting too, because this morning I was supposed to be at a sheriff's meeting, a sheriff's and chief's meeting, but I'm here today. So we sent one of our chiefs, and when she got there, she texted another chief to say, I'm the only woman here. Yes, you are. There are not very many women chiefs, that attend these type of meetings. So I thought it was important that if I'm not going to be there, fill it with a chief that is a female, and she's starting to see the challenges, but I think it's going to help her along the way too. And whatever she learns, she can pass on. So that way we do pave that path for other women and encourage them.
I love your personal story. I just think it's just such a wonderful success story. Good for you for really sticking with your dream and following through and not only entering law enforcement, but rising to the top position in your organization. It's just remarkable. And so really proud of you for that.
Well,
Uh,
thank you. I appreciate it.
yeah, no, it's great. And I think it's a wonderful story. I mean, what a wonderful role model too for young people in the community. What about you, Chief Lees? Challenges and how you overcame them along the way?
I think one of my biggest challenges early on when I graduated Indiana University is that I was very young. So I was a certified officer at 21 and got hired right away after graduation at my previous agency. And I came into an agency that I didn't really know much about the agency or the town. I did not go back home after college. I stayed in the Indianapolis area. And I just felt like, I was kind of a fish out of water at first because I was the third female officer ever on that department. And I really just focused on the job, focused on what I needed to do, and just for them to view me as I'm not just some 21-year-old. I'm confident, I am certified, and I can do the job. And so that's what I did. I always said I put my head down and just worked really hard at anything I ever did. And I was very fortunate to have the chance to early on become a dare officer, become a bicycle patrol officer, become an instructor, a field training officer. I'm very fortunate the opportunities that they provided me that I was able to capitalize on. And I think one of my biggest pieces of advice that I always give women in law enforcement or even any officer is try anything and everything. Everyone wants to go out and be on SWAT and K9 and all the high liability or the high adrenaline runs. But if you try everything and you try the things that people don't want to do, I was able to write policy. I was able to be accreditation manager with people didn't want my job. And then you get good at it. And then you end up being the department expert at it. And that's what really helps you rise through the ranks. So my barriers early on was age and getting that initial promotion. Really trying to put my name out there and show them that I could do the job. Later on in my career, when I was selected to come over to IU, it was then a flurry of what do we do? Jill's leaving at my previous agency. I was the deputy chief when I retired. And someone came up to me and said, and I'll never forget this, and this kind of summarized my whole career there. It was that, I've always looked at how hard you've worked, and I've always felt that everyone has taken advantage or taken you for granted, that I would always be there. I would always take care of certain tasks. And that obviously became their obstacle of trying to, replace all the things that I did. And that was something that really resonated with me. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks that if I really sat back and looked at different things that during my career and all the different tasks that I did on the police department, that people just assumed I would do it, or people just trusted in the fact that I would do it. But at the end of the day, I think they trusted me a little bit too much to do it instead of that value that I did bring to the table. So I was really appreciative of the comment that he made, and it showed that I mattered to him, and all the work that I did matter to people at the department, whether they did say that. But sometimes throughout your career, you just kind of feel like you just keep grinding and grinding without any result that you'd like to see that's tangible. But please believe that there are so many things behind the scenes that you do that do not go unnoticed. So I think that that kind of sums up a lot of how I just worked my way up through every rank of the department, and it wasn't easy. You have to just keep preparing yourself personally and professionally every day to be ready. And you can ask any officer at IU what my favorite word is, and it is opportunity. And you have to be ready to hit that print button for your resume and cover letter anytime an opportunity comes up. And I've seen where a chief's there one day and the next day they say they're going to retire, or a new opening for a different position or a different division. You know, how bad do you want the work? And you have to be prepared and ready for that time. So I think that it kind of comes full circle of how hard I've had to work, not just as a woman, but as an officer in general. But obviously, as a woman, you kind of stick out. They want to know, can you drive a car? Can you shoot a gun really well? Um, and I think a funny story that I can share is one time I was at the range and they nailed down a bowling pin on purpose because they knew I was a pretty good shot. And I just kept hitting. They got this on video. I'm sure it's on VHS somewhere, but I just kept hitting this bowling pin, and they did this little joke to me and the other female officer in the department, and we both knew we hit it. But it was just kind of the camaraderie and the brother and sisterhood of, yeah, we're gonna joke with them a little bit, but you always just kind of stand out in your own way, and it's just how you present yourself and have that confidence in your ability of, when I was done with that line of fire, I said, I know I hit that. What did you do? So,
Great story.
um, you know, I think you just got to be prepared for any obstacle and barrier that does come your way, and don't sweat the small stuff,
Mhm.
um, and just have the right mindset.
Those are great points. I mean, you made so many good points, but yeah, I love the hard work, the work ethic. I mean, we can't overstate the importance of great work ethic, whether male or female. I always say, I just quickly, when people say, what do you attribute your success? Really, three things, and it's incredibly hard work, great mentors, and extraordinary family support. Uh, I want to circle back now. Sorry, Chief Hawkins, it's been a little while since we talked here, but I have a few questions for you. Let's talk about the mentoring issue. Who were your mentors? What made them good mentors? And what do you think? Have you been able to really successfully mentor people? I look at it as my most important responsibility, and I've loved the opportunity to mentor both formally and informally.
Thank you. Absolutely. Starting out at the gate, my most important mentor that brought me foundation was my father, and then my mother. My father always woke us up with the mantras that were positive mantras of, where there's a will is a way, early to bed, early to rise. And he was always instilling positive motivation, letting us know that we can do anything, which made us competitive. We played sports, and I think out of four children, I was the loud one, so I had a loud mouth. And I had to learn a lot along the way. My next mentor probably became my best friend in college, always encouraging me and always supporting each other. And then after that, because I came out the academy so young, I was just riding on those mentors because young, I had to go against people who, one, didn't believe I should be an officer because I was a female. It was not until I went to a unit or a division and had a supervisor draw out what was my strengths. After that, I was empowered. Then another strong mentor was, at the time I was a new sergeant, and there was a major. He retired as a deputy chief. It was a major of the district, of the zone, and it was funny because when I first came out there, I was new and I didn't come out for like 6 weeks because my oldest had been in a major accident. So I couldn't come out, but he said, go ahead and take care of yourself. And then after I got out there, I found out I was expecting with my youngest. And he was slightly chauvinistic because he had a friend that he talked to was who was another major in the police department who was a female, and he shared with her. He said, "Who'd you send out to me? This sergeant. She's pregnant. She's not even here." And he had already judged me before I got there, but I just went there and did my job. And he saw the work that I did, and then he brought me and said, "Okay, I'm gonna need you to help me do my job." But he was a mentor because he allowed me to eventually be honest with him. I confronted him about that statement. I confronted him and said, "Hey, I know what you said about me." And he was honest to say, "You're right. I'm not perfect." But he also told me, he says, "Look, I know that you work hard and I know you're smart. And it is my responsibility to prepare you to be a leader in this organization because I'm a leader. So I'm about to help you, one, slow down, learn how to be patient, and understand different elements of an organization." So that was my first mentor, because he moved to different places and he took me along the way. Even when I didn't want to go, he was like, "No, I kind of need you to come help me in this other division." So he became, to this day, he's a great mentor. I can call him. And then I had other female leader mentors. Then I went to another department, and that chief at that time, I learned so much from him, um, based just watching alone. But the responsibility, you are truly right, of me acknowledging my responsibility, just like that first step that you said. I need to develop people when they don't realize they need to be developed, just like I was. I didn't know I was supposed to be moving along. I was maybe a nomad, just working hard. He's like, "No, there should be purpose in everything you do. You should be learning as much as possible, expanding yourself." So I do my best to do that now. I take the time, no matter, even if it's not in my organization, when people call me or text me, I take that time to listen, to hear them, to ask questions, to see what is it that they want and what is it that I think they need. And I try to feed them that information and give them guidance, and then also still remain available to them. Because at times, just being a venting board for someone who doesn't understand things that they have to look out for is a help. And then my peers, my sisters-in-law in this field, I've learned so much of what they're saying is inspiring. But the importance of still looking for new mentors, looking for people who are doing things and learning from them is crucial. But never giving that up. Males, being a mentor to not just women, to men, and actually being a mentor to people. I said in the beginning, I love people. I'm in this field, because it just happens to fit my passion. But at the same time, as I learn from other people and whatever they're doing, I try my best to encourage them to get out their own heads. As Sheriff Rivera said, as far as your biggest obstacle is probably yourself, doubting yourself, and putting your own barriers up when you shouldn't, and just needing that nudge to move along the way to say, "Okay, what else do we need? Do you need my help? What can I help you figure out?" And study and prepare the dots, because once you get focused, you're going to be able to do it. And then if you don't get that position or that spot, then just wait and learn from that at that time and see what else that you need, so that when the opportunity comes, you're ready for it.
Oh, you made so many incredible points there. I love the fact that you acknowledged your family members. I often say that too, that, my dad was a teacher, my uncle was a missionary priest, two of my grandparents were immigrants. And, the courage that my grandparents showed, in leaving a place where there was just a lot of poverty and no opportunity, and just with the clothes on their backs, just the courage to venture off to a new world was just remarkable for me. I love that, and then that commitment to service that I grew up with. So I love the fact that you acknowledged your family. I mean, mentors don't have to be simply people in the workplace. In fact, I think that most of the people that have influenced my life, my career, were people that preceded my career in law enforcement. Although I was really, really fortunate to have great mentors like Bill Bratton, who went on to be the New York commissioner and the chief out in LA, and just an extraordinary friend and mentor, continues to be today. So I really appreciate, and I think we have a responsibility not only to mentor people in our own organizations, but I love to put my arms around young people in our communities and try to provide them with opportunities, whether they're educational opportunities or job opportunities, and just help and guide and support them. I think that's incredibly important too. Uh, what about you, Chief Kennedy? Tell us a little bit about your experience with mentoring, both as a mentee, but also as a mentor.
Well, for me, we didn't have a lot of female officers at our department, so I really did look out to other agencies and find women that I wanted to emulate or that I could learn from. And you don't have to sometimes even know the individual. So, for instance, with Commissioner O'Toole, like I mentioned to you before, I followed you in your career, and I was able to read articles and learn, and it was kind of providing me an opportunity to learn from your experiences as well. But what happened for me in Chula Vista is I found that as I was a female lieutenant here, that there were so many women that wanted to learn from other women. So in 2009, we started kind of an offshoot of what they did with the women leaders in law enforcement for the state of California. And we did one here in San Diego County. And so we had 800 people show up at our police department for this event that we put on. And it made us realize that there are so many women that just want to hear from other women. They want to learn. We had many of our leadership, male counterparts all showed up because they wanted to understand. And sometimes they don't understand the stories because they don't walk in our shoes, right? And so that created the whole process for us to start as one of the founding members of San Diego County Women Leaders in Law Enforcement group. And when I became the president of that group, and we're able to grow it, and still to this day, it is going. And in the state of California, every year we have a huge event where we bring all law enforcement women together along with our male counterparts, as I mentioned. And it has become, usually on average, they have about 1,000 that show up for the event. And it's an opportunity to network. Part of it is just network and talking that makes a huge difference. But I did want to tell you something that I found that was important, as I always look to leaders that I kind of say, you have to walk the walk. And so to me, that's super important when I'm looking for somebody who's going to be someone that I look to for ideas and as a mentor. And oftentimes, what I learned through the mentorship I had through women leaders in law enforcement in the state of California is I never ask of my people to do what I'm not willing to do myself. And I think when you create an environment, what women bring to the table is compassion, which I think is so important, humility, and they understand that humanity is an important aspect, the human side of law enforcement. And so what we do here in the city of Chula Vista is we have a motto, and it's called "It's the heart behind the badge." And when each of my officers walk out the patrol area and they go out into the field each day, there's a mirror that's there and they see their reflection in it. And it says, "It's what's behind the badge that matters most." So it's really all about the heart for law enforcement. And so I think when you're looking for mentors, you need to find someone that's going to be the right mentor for you. But it doesn't even have to be anybody that you actually know. It could be somebody that you admire, that you look to, that can help you. And be brave enough to even send an email to that person. Don't be afraid to any of these chiefs that are on this panel, or marshal or sheriff or Commissioner O'Toole. I love it when someone just sends me an email and says, "Hey, I appreciated listening to you and I have a couple questions for you." That's how mentoring starts. It doesn't have to be this big professional process. You can just build an organic relationship, and people want to take interest in seeing you be successful. I always tell my people, your success is my success. That's what I like to see. I like to see people in my organization and others that I know, I like to see them be successful. It makes me proud that I might have had just a little piece of helping them be successful.
Really good points. Thank you very much for sharing those. And I agree with you. I'm always humbled when somebody sends me a message or asks for my advice. And I think I feel it's a privilege to be able to support somebody and provide some guidance. So I would encourage those to reach out too. I'll never forget when I first met Bill Bratton. I admired him from afar because, he was a rising star in policing. He was only 32 years old when he was appointed to the number two place in the organization in the Boston Police Department. And I really wanted to be a part of his team. And I remember building up courage over the course of a week, requesting an appointment. I was literally shaking when I entered his office because ordinarily I wasn't that bold. And I walked in and said, "Look, I just want to tell you that I have huge admiration. I know you're going places, and I would love to be part of your team." And then I took a deep breath and he said, "Wow, good for you." He admired the courage. Little did he know how much effort that took. But, I would say too, be bold, be courageous, be polite in the process. But I think that, most of us out there really appreciate the opportunity to provide whatever support and guidance we can. We're getting some great questions coming in here, so I'd like to get away from the scripted questions and speak to the audience a bit. There's one question here, I really appreciate it, asking what advice we'd give to women in law enforcement that are not in sworn positions. This is an area that I feel passionate about. I don't think we've given enough attention to or respect to those who make commitments to police careers that are non-sworn careers. When I was in Seattle, for instance, as the chief of police there, by the time I left, my command staff was the most diverse in the department's history in terms of race and gender, but also it was diverse in terms of thought and experience. We had, by the time I left, half of our command staff was non-sworn. And among us, we had some extraordinary police officers, career police officers, who were well educated and very committed. We had 4 lawyers, we had 4 PhDs, we even had a former Boeing engineer uh, who contributed to our command team. And we were diverse in every respect, diversity of thought as well. So I'm really hoping that as time passes, we're going to see greater emphasis on providing equal professional development opportunities to our civilian colleagues in the business. I just noticed recently there's actually a woman who rose through the civilian ranks of a police organization in New Jersey who was appointed to the chief's position. So I think that's really interesting. So I guess my advice to the person that submitted that question is, you deserve to have the same opportunities to get the same respect. And I think that all of the advice that women are providing here in this forum today applies equally to you as well. Any of my fellow panelists want to weigh in on that one?
Can I? I would love to do that. So
Absolutely.
absolutely. Everyone in my organization, and I can't stress that enough, is important no matter what position they're doing. But I see people and the value when you empower people to support the mission, the whole mission. And you never know where it's coming from. But as you see the interest, I've had a research and developer, accreditation manager, who she was all on board. She was young. And I realized she supported the organization. So I made sure she received the training to understand what we were doing and why we were doing it to the point where she got recruited by another major city organization. And I'm excited for her. And literally they saw her her how beneficial she was. And I'm just ecstatic because when she's there, she knows a lot because she was overly just attentive to work. I have also my crime analyst division. Every single one of them support the sworn staff, my communication, because I also share with them their role. We need their role for information, and then whatever training they need supports everything. And when they're empowered to do that, they go out and proactively support the sworn side. I actually just created another position that's administrative, non-sworn, so that I also can have the continuity for the position of the chief. Should the chief leave, you don't have to retrain a sworn position as a chief of staff, as the top level. The business side continues on. So, non sworn, keep looking for training, keep asking for training. You have to be bold enough to also ask and look, what else can I learn about law enforcement, the business law enforcement, the analytics, to see what you want to do in that field. So be proactive with it and ask your supervisors all the way up the chain. You follow the same chain of command as sworn. Just ask those questions and go out for the training that you need.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chief. And I think I would hope that all the chiefs and senior officers on the call today, the sworn people on the call, will provide opportunities to non-sworn people in their organizations. Really consider, as you're promoting people into a particular role, does that role need to be sworn? Yeah, I found it was just wonderful to bring more diversity of thought into the realm when we were developing new reform and innovative strategies in Seattle. So I would encourage all the people on the call today to think outside the box and bring people in who've have completely different perspectives. It's exciting. It kind of broadens everybody's horizons. Sheriff, did you have something to say about this as well?
Yes, I just wanted to say how important our civilian staff are to us. I think that we have to continue to thank them all the time because they do support our agencies and everything that we do with our mission. And one of the things that we do is when we're recruiting, I've been on the recruiting photos with them. So people understand that it's not just law enforcement, it's our nurses, it's our records clerks, it's all of the forensics, it's everything matters to the police department to, complete our mission. But I think at the same time, we have to let them know that how much they're appreciated all the time and keep reinforcing that. When I first one to become the sheriff, I noticed that with our civilians, our policy was so outdated. It said female, not just the officers, but the female records clerks, just any female employee, you had to wear your hair in a bun. Now that was way long ago when people viewed women as you should have your hair in a bun and up. So as I became the sheriff, I changed that policy because our records clerks, they have their role and it's important, but sitting behind a desk doing computer work, doing some of our records for us doesn't require them to have their hair up in a bun and all women look the same. So we changed that, and it was very interesting to see how they took that. The morale changed. And now you see them, they do their hair very nice. Everybody looks good, but they're not given this image that they're supposed to look like from man who created those policies 100 years ago. And, it's very interesting to see how just that small dynamic changing the policy changed the morale and made them feel, appreciated. And I think it's really important that we recognize some of the barriers put in place years ago with not knowing that women, are going to progress in law enforcement. And we have to change with the times. And that's important.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. We have so many great questions coming in that I'm going to do a lightning round here. I'm going to ask everybody to try to answer the question within a minute. First of all, I see that my dear friend Kathleen Kiernan is listening in today. Kathleen is somebody for whom I have huge respect. We kind of rose through the ranks during the same time period. She in federal law enforcement, she rose to be an assistant director of the ATF during a period of time when there were very few women in law enforcement, never mind federal law enforcement. But she was asking for all of us, and I'll just turn to a few of you here, but what about the challenges of balancing freedom of speech and some of the extremist viewpoints, which exceed First Amendment rights, with the department and ongoing demonstrations? How are you doing that in your communities? And I think I'll first turn to Chief Kennedy to tell us a little bit about what's happening in California, how you're balancing that First Amendment versus some of the extremist activity. And I'd also love to hear from Chief Lees as well. But we'll try to do a lightning round here so that we get to everybody's questions. Thank you.
You gave me the biggest challenge of keeping it to 1 minute, so I'll try to do that. But it has been a difficult time in law enforcement because we've always wanted to balance the rights of people to have freedom of speech. And I've been a commander of our mobile field force team that has been involved in always protecting people's rights to be able to do that. We've been very lucky in our community. We sit right next to San Diego and we're 7 miles from the Mexico border. So you can imagine that with, cross border, cross traffic violence, human trafficking, all these things, we have many challenges that we have had to deal with. And our crime has increased by 30% this past year. And then getting our officers to actually I've had to deal with trying to encourage my officers that you have to be on the streets right now, that we need to be out there protecting the vulnerable, because as COVID hit, they didn't want to deal with proactivity. So that's been a challenge as well. But we have not had to deal with many protests. We've had a few of them here, but they have all been very peaceful. And I think that has a lot to do with the relationship that we have built with our community over the many years. We actually had a protest from BLM on our front steps of our police department. The only thing that they were demanding was that we have a police oversight committee. We do have a Chiefs Community Advisory Committee, but the thing that I found interesting after the fact was they sent me a letter and they said they were proud of our police department because they saw so many officers of color as well as many women, and they felt like the officers treated them with respect. So as a chief of police, I couldn't be prouder. But then again, I had to send my officers all over San Diego County for the many protests that were going on. And these were more than protests. They started out as protests and rallies, and then they turned into very violent encounters where my officers had hatchets, bottles, and so forth thrown at them. So it's been very challenging, but I think right now the most important thing for law enforcement is to listen and be connected to the communities. And I have, as the president of the San Diego County Chief and Sheriff's Association, my role is to bring in all the activists and community leaders and faith-based leaders that feel that segments of their communities are marginalized. And I encourage you to think about this as well. You have to have the conversations and you need to invite people to the table. But there is nothing wrong with reform if it's done for the right reasons. And so that's really what we have to talk about right now. We've done a lot of policing over the years the same way. And right now I tell my people, I don't care if we've always done it that way. Is it the right way to do it? And so I think when people see you as a leader being credible and being willing to listen and trying to do things for the greater good of our communities, I think that doesn't, it's always going to be a challenge, and you're going to always have naysayers, but we're dealing with automated license plate readers right now. And we only have 4, and we're a 52 square mile city. And we actually got tremendous support after we took the time to have a community forum and just sit down. Even though we've done it many times before, the time is different. So right now, even if you've done all these things and gone to city council in the past, no one was listening before. And so it never was an issue. And now you as a law enforcement leader, you have to do things differently, and you have to really make efforts to connect with your communities. And so to me, it's fundamentally important that we don't keep our doors closed in law enforcement, that we open them up, we engage, we expect when we go to a restaurant or to a grocery store to have customer service. Well, the same thing should happen in law enforcement. When people stop calling us is when we will no longer be there. And right now, we need to provide our community with customer service right now. We need to take care of our community. If you invest in your community, they will invest in you.
Well, so much for that lightning round.
Told you I can't talk for 1 minute.
No, you know what? I'm so pleased you did, because you covered so many wonderful things, and it just goes to show that my ability as a moderator is very limited. But that was extraordinary. Your answer was perfect. So thank you for doing that. And I really appreciated what you said about the importance of community, because you really need to establish those relationships ahead of the event, that trust and those lines of communication. And I always try to connect with community organizers to the greatest extent possible, whether it was prior to an event or sometimes if it was a spontaneous event, try to seek them out at the event itself. And I really think, although we don't have a lot of time to talk about it today, that in terms of demonstration management, it really needs to be a tiered approach, starting off with as soft approach as possible. Police officers in ordinary uniforms, engaging with people on the front lines, but of course, preparing, having the invisible, SWAT resources or mobile field forces or public order platoons hidden behind the scenes. So if things do escalate, you're certainly prepared to agree to deal with a very violent situation. But interesting to hear about the campus environment, Chief Lees, and let's see how you can do in the lightning round here.
I tend to speak very fast, so I'll just speak even faster. I just wanted to share very briefly the campus perspective. And I guess we always say that we know how to have a demonstration here on the Bloomington campus. There's probably not a week that goes by that we don't have someone, some group, organization exercising their First Amendment rights. And you're absolutely correct, Kathy. We take a tiered approach. We reach out to organizers, and we are very, very fortunate on our campus to have a demonstration response team that's led by our student affairs, which is even a softer approach. And we really can gauge the temperature that way. We have a great connection with our local Bloomington Police Department. We work hand in hand. And again, this is something that we do when we can put a plan into place very quickly and easily. And last summer, we had a demonstration that included thousands of people that myself and the chief of Bloomington Police Department walked alongside people, and it was very peaceful. Because there again, we have a culture and environment here in Bloomington that is very open to First Amendment, exercises and for different events. So that is something that we constantly work at every day with every different type of group and organization.
Great. Thank you very much. Really good information. I want to thank Chief William Balling for joining us today. He sent in a message. He is currently serving as the president of the Ohio Chiefs of Police Association, and he sits on the Ohio Police Officer Recruitment Committee. So he indicated that they're looking for programs now. They're working on programs to help diversify Ohio law enforcement agencies, and he's wondering if there are people on the call today, on the panel today as well, who would be willing to help explore. And I say absolutely. We have a great team backing us up today between NAWLEE and the Law Enforcement Museum. And we promise you, Chief, that we'll be back to you, and anything that I can do or we can do to support you, we're all for it. Sometimes we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look to best practices elsewhere. And even though each of our jurisdictions is unique, there are some principles across the board that apply. So we promise to get back to you. And thanks very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Let's see, what else do we have? Also, there's a request that we send out a list of resources or organization websites that are being mentioned today. So we will certainly ask the backup team, to do that as well. There's another question here. Does 30 by 30 include inclusive language to specifically hire transgender women, non-binary folks? So do we have any, let's see, who do we have on here today that represents the NAWLEE and Law Enforcement Museum 30 by 30? And I would say absolutely. I certainly hope it does. That it's been a priority of mine as I've gone out and tried to recruit a much more diverse candidate pool. We were very successful on that front in Seattle by first establishing relationships with the community. And and actually, we had the community come in and help us develop policies and procedures generally across the board. So I say absolutely. We were very successful in our relationships with the transgender community in Seattle. We hired a transgender officer while I was there, and I believe that they've continued to do recruitment in that community. So I'm all for it. Anybody else have any questions? Well, we need our police services to be truly representative of the communities we serve if we're going to be credible and trusted. Okay, let's see. Are there any initiatives to hire women from minority groups, particular minority groups, women with disabilities, women representing different cultural backgrounds? Let's see. Why don't I turn this over? We haven't heard from the Marshal for a while. Marshal, could you tell us what's happening in federal law enforcement? Are there any specific recruitment efforts out there to hire women from specific minority groups?
Yes, I can speak on behalf of the Marshal Service right now, but I also can give you my experience over at the Bureau as far as efforts to recruit. And, you know, the Bureau is at about 22% women agents right now, which is really high. And that's something to be proud of. I think when I came in 25 years ago to federal law enforcement, the Bureau was at about 14%. We at the Marshal Service are at 9.4, which is really about half of all our DOJ partners. So we, in the last 18 months, have really been putting forth an incredible effort in concert with our Human Resource Division at headquarters. And so we're trying to be strategic about it. We're very fortunate here in the Southwest because we have a great, diverse pool to pull from. They've done all kinds of studies about diversity and what areas we can target. Sometimes people are afraid to use the word target, but when we're looking for special groups of people, specifically women and ethnic minorities, which I am both, the Southwest is a really good market to pull from. So we're fortunate in that we have a target-rich environment here. So in the Marshal Service, we have been working exceedingly hard to get out to universities, the laboratories, and different police agencies that I'm very honest with the chiefs and all my friends over there that I'm stealing their people. So I know that most agencies across the country are really trying to emphasize the need to look like our country and look like our communities. And I know that in general, law enforcement is very committed to trying to recruit and bring forward a workforce that truly represents our communities. It's really very powerful to be able to go to some of these recruiting events as the U.S. Marshal and tell them we're recruiting girls like you. We're a very rural state, and I grew up, as I said earlier, in a very tiny town. And to be able to say I grew up on dirt roads with love, water, and air, and you can do this. People said that to me and believed in me, and it's really powerful for us to get out and do that. So I myself am incredibly committed to this. And I ask everyone to take it on. It's not hard, but it takes effort. And I have a recruit sitting on my couch in my office at least once a week. And I spend at least an hour, usually more than that, committing myself to bringing people into our organization. So yes, the Marshal Service is hiring. And I know many of your organizations are looking for incredibly talented women, minorities, to bring forward into this incredibly great career.
Thank you so much, Marshall. Really appreciate that. We have another question here. As leaders who also happen to be women, do you have any advice about intentionally creating a group of professional supporters, collaborators, and leaders who are also women? I would just say no better organization than NAWLEE. So I hope that those of you who aren't members of NAWLEE will certainly can consider NAWLEE membership. And then I'd also encourage you on a local level to go out and not only engage with other women who are in law enforcement, but women who represent very different disciplines as well. I think with a lot of the unique challenges we're facing in our communities today, particularly at the complicated intersection of public health and public safety, we're going to need multidisciplinary approaches. We're going to have to harness our resources across disciplines. So I would really encourage you to get involved in organizations that go beyond law enforcement. I think we'll shift gears here. If we don't get to your questions, I promise you that we will follow up and try to answer them offline. But just want to shift gears a bit and talk about the incredibly challenging times today. I've lived through the riots and demonstrations post Rodney King, post Ferguson, and now post tragedy in Minneapolis. I guess we really need to capture this opportunity to get it right this time. So I'd be interested in hearing from all of you. Where do we start? How do we ensure that 10, 15 years from now, we're not having this same discussion? I mean, I'm completely committed to police reform. I've been working on police reform for the past several decades on both sides of the Atlantic. And so I'm absolutely committed to reform. I also think that we should embed a culture of continuous improvement and innovation in our organizations so that we're always looking to do better. In other words, we're not just going to have a reform plan and tick the boxes. We always need to push the envelope and see how we can get better. But let me start here with Sheriff Rivera. Where do you think we're headed now, Sheriff, in terms of reform and innovation? What do we need to do to get it right this time?
Well, I think we're headed in the right direction. First of all, we have to not be afraid of police reform. And I think that we have to make sure that we're looking at evidence-based information, not knee-jerk reactions. And, people's feelings are important, but it isn't always what it is. So using evidence-based information is going to be the best way to move us forward to the future. So generations don't have to deal with what we're dealing with now. And I think that consistency between all law enforcement agencies has to happen, because what we're seeing is when one agency does something that creates problems for all law enforcement across the board, and we find out that we're not all doing things the same. And sometimes those consistencies work better for law enforcement. So that's just my opinion.
No, I really appreciate that. Points well made. No question, the community has to have a strong voice at the table. I've always said when people ask me what my community policing strategy is going to be, I tell them I'm definitely not dictating it from the top down. I really think it should be developed from grassroots, from the bottom up, and people who live and work in communities, and actually cops out in the front line, know better the challenges they're facing and usually come up with some pretty good solutions for dealing with those challenges. So I think community voice is going to be absolutely essential in the process. Uh, how about you, Chief Kennedy?
Well, thank you for asking because you brought up a couple points that really are important to us right now. The way that we focus on policing in Chula Vista is we meet the needs and the expectations of our community. And we've been very lucky here because we're the lowest staff department in San Diego County, and which creates challenges and for those of you who might be on the East Coast, this might sound crazy, but we don't even have one officer per thousand out here. So we have to be very innovative how we police our community. And when you're talking about reform and you're talking about change, we utilize our community advisory committee to do that. They look at all of our policies, and we've been taking what the state of California is very progressive when it comes to laws and requirements and policies and relating to policing. And right now, it's even more challenging than it has been before. So we're trying to work with them to make sure that the laws are for the right reason and not for a reaction to what's occurring. But there's two little areas I want to focus on about why technology can be used to enhance the safety of your community and can be used to enhance your officers as they're out there in the field and the subjects we encounter. So right now, everyone's talking about de-escalation and officers' actions, and we all wear body-worn camera here. We have live 911 where my officers can geofence to a particular their beat or wherever within 1 mile of where their patrol car goes, and they can hear incoming 911 calls before dispatch even dispatches a call. They can hear details and critical information that can help them start roving right to that call right away. But we also have here drone as first responders. So actual drones respond to emergency calls, feeding officers real-time information through their cell phone or a mobile data computer, which helps them. As you know, we don't all have crystal balls and we don't know what we're going into, but it helps officers make better decisions so that everyone goes home safely. And I'm hopeful that we just received the FAA approval to go citywide. So 100% of 52 square miles receives the ability to have drones respond there to feed information. And in some of these national stories that we hear, it would be nice to have officers to have more information. So maybe sometimes we don't even go into the scene. So I think it's really important for us right now to look at everything in policing to reevaluate the way that we handle things. Our officers are in an immensely dangerous profession, but we also want to make sure that we're keeping our community safe, and even the individuals that we contact, the subjects we encounter, the first thing we want is for them to go safely as well. So I'm excited about what the future holds for us in law enforcement.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you raising technology issues. I mean, technology can be a wonderful tool. Certainly, it will never replace the need
Never.
for good human interaction and development of trust with the community, but certainly technology tools can be great. I love using technology and transparency and public facing dashboards of things of that nature, share as much information with the community as possible. I think sadly, a lot of people have no idea what police actually do.
Right.
I saw a study recently that said that police only focus on violent crime 4% of the time, and on law enforcement less than 15% of the time. That's across our country, meaning that we spend a lot more time dealing with and trying to assist vulnerable people. I know
Right.
in Seattle, 10,000 times a year, we were addressing people in serious mental health crisis and trying to get them the services they needed. So I think it's really important that we use technology to gather information and share as much of that as possible with our communities as well.
Right. I encourage you, Commissioner, to have them go to our website because you can see the flight plan 24 hours later, synopsis of calls. All the dashboards are there. We put out all of our use of force. So dashboards, to me, agencies can be way more transparent, and it helps those officers in the field or those deputies be able to direct them to a place to receive all that transparency. Now is the time where we really have to look at what we share, that we're more open about sharing with our communities.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And then when people see that officers are using force in a fraction of of overall cases too. It puts things in perspective. So I think if it's bad news, we just need to put it out there, take responsibility for it, and work with the community to address it. And if it's good news, then why wouldn't we share it? And I think we need to help police tell their own story as well. I would say, Chief Hawkins, what do you think about this? What's the most significant thing that you have underway right now that you feel will help with police reform and community trust?
So, thank you for that question. What I feel, I'm gonna start off by saying, remember, I start off by I'm very competitive, so I'm always working to try to get it right and do it right, as well as I'm a big cheerleader. I love my family. I love my profession. So I'm gonna always support my profession and my family. But at the same time, I'm gonna hold them accountable the most. I'm gonna have high expectation for them. So what I truly believe at times where I've had challenges in my career, I had to first look at myself and really self-evaluate myself. Am I doing it the best way I can be doing it? Have I made errors? And take ownership of that. So I think the first reform is us looking at ourselves first, trying to be honest, trying to look in from a different perspective, trying to truly understand the biggest and best asset we have is our personnel, educating our personnel to truly the whether it be the perception of the community, the perception of the people who feel like they're marginalized, and try to understand it from their perspective, knowing that if we are truly projecting our intention and not taking our actions the best way we can, then we're first listening, bringing them to the table and say, well, why do you feel that way? And then reevaluate it. Can we do it a different way to make sure we're on mission? I sit on the National Use of Force Task Force, right? We've started it since 2016, 2017. We need volunteer agencies to volunteer that data so that as a profession, we are evaluating true data that we can get better with. I also believe um, having a national policy of standards is where we need to go. I don't want to be afraid that my daughter is driving late at night in another jurisdiction, that law enforcement entity is going to treat her as I know they should in the same manner. But unfortunately, I am, because my daughter is of color. I also have to have that conversation that she may be treated differently, because it's an honest conversation and it's about survival. So if we work to establish across the nation national expected standards for agencies that are not accredited to be able to follow and have best expectations for 21st century policing, reform, reimagining, things that we know as a profession we work towards every day, and provide those policies and procedures for the entities that cannot afford to be accredited, but also need shared training commitments, shared learning opportunities, shared empowering opportunities. I think that is going to be the biggest change for reform, as well as educating not just on the community, but on different cultures. Truly wanted to say, I really want to learn about your culture, what you're feeling in your environment. I really want to learn about your community from your perspective, because I don't understand that and I want to learn that. So that's what I believe would change a big reform for our profession in the future.
No, I really appreciate your comments. Those are great, right on point too. Um, I have another question here, and it's what advice do you give women trying to get into law enforcement? You know, how do they stand out when competing against other candidates?
I think if you study and bring your true authentic self and share, listen to the questions, listen to the expectation, study and know what you want to do and why you want to do what you're doing or be in this position, you're going to stand out by itself. When I do interviews for everyone coming on to my agency after they've passed most of the background, and I want to hear the honest person tell me what they can bring to the table It doesn't have to be you're strong. It doesn't have to be you've thought about this all your life. You may have the skills in communication, social work. You may have skills in anything, but bringing that service to my agency is what I'm looking for. So bringing your true authentic self of why you're really there and why you want to learn the skills, the education to be this profession. I believe being your true authentic self is what is going to make you stand out and not be afraid.
I love that word, authenticity. I mean, I don't think there's anything more important than being authentic, and so I really appreciate that answer. Uh, all right, so let's move on to some of the other questions we have here. Um, what skills do you think women bring to policing that are different, and how can they use those skills to improve public safety for the communities they serve? I mean, are we truly different as police officers and leaders?
I want everyone to know that there is not the one thing that I love about female officers is they have compassion and they have the ability to talk through scenarios. Uh, a female officer has the ability to de-escalate the situation just by the way that she goes up and handles communicating with someone. They're not threatening. And please, ladies, you don't need to be any different than you are. Like when you hear Chief Hawkins mentioning be your authentic self, be yourself, having humor, having compassion, humility, helping people through the challenges that they're going through. And as I mentioned to you earlier, when people stop calling us is when we have to worry, but they call us to help us problem solve. And sometimes it's not a significant problem, but I tell my officers, if this was, let's say you're going to just a call over someone arguing over car keys, which believe it or not, we've gone to those, right? And you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to go to a call like this, right? Well, I tell the officers, if that was your family member, would you expect an officer to do something differently? So put yourself in the shoes of someone else and help them through the challenges. And I think my experience is that women take the time, they're good communicators. They talk people through things. They help come up with solutions and problems. They don't get caught up in the ego of it. They don't personalize as much. And I mean, it's to me, it's refreshing. And I don't want women to think that you have to be different. You don't need to be just like your male counterparts. Be proud of who you are. I've had people say to me when they find out I'm in law enforcement, and please know that I love all of my employees in my department, but they would say, they can't believe, they go, well, what are you? You're in law enforcement? Are you a dispatcher? Or do you, well, you don't drive a car by yourself, right? And that's women saying that to me. So we all need to encourage each other and realize that each one of us brings unique, different characteristics that make us successful. But I mean, the female officers that I have rock. The support staff that I have here, we call them professional staff at our department, are 67% women. They rock. And it's the way that they handle situations that makes them so successful because women know how to talk through situations. They can get men to do things, sometimes these subjects that we encounter that their male counterparts cannot do because they use ego sometimes with it. And so I just be yourself.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when I think back on my own mentors, they were all men. There were no women in the business at the time, and so we all have unique personality characteristics and all of that. But I learned most from those people, those men who were incredibly authentic and principled. So I think that we need to look, whether it's females or males, we need to look at uh, people's principles, people's values, and personality characteristics. But yeah, I mean, there are lots of debate. There's lots of debate out there about male leadership style versus female leadership style. But hopefully, over time, that's blending nicely, and we're just learning, what's the best leadership style.
Well, yeah, we
And
just want good leadership style, whether you're
absolutely,
male, female.
and it's principle and authenticity. I think it starts there. So. Thank you for your answer. Also, I know that you were hoping to answer another question that came up, and that's one of the panelists is working on a collective impact initiative since August on and would like to hear about human trafficking efforts. I know it's a little bit shifting gears a bit, but I know that you have particular interest in this area. Do you want to share that with us?
Yeah, well, like I said, we're 7 miles from the Mexico border, and human trafficking is really a significant issue in our community. And right now we have human trafficking task force. We have them within our own organization as well on a regional basis, but they're really focusing on the vulnerable community that are being impacted. And right now, even with, I completely understand anyone wanting to have an opportunity to be a part of coming into the United States. But unfortunately, there are some individuals that are focused on using that in a negative way to um, create challenges for these individuals coming here. And when you see the human trafficking issues that we're facing right now, especially people are children of very young ages. We're seeing kids like 14, 15 years old that are kind of being placed into situations where they're indentured servants as well. So it's a huge issue here in San Diego County that we all have to work together on a regional basis to address. And so I know I did read somebody had mentioned something to reach out to me. I can connect you with the right people here in San Diego to help you as you try to do more research. But it's a sad scenario when you see what happens to some of these individuals, and they're trying to do is just have a better way of life. They trust the wrong people, and then they get put into these scenarios. And when I see juvenile crime in San Diego County, especially in Chula Vista, has increased significantly, and a lot of it has to do with some of these kids that have been placed in these scenarios right now. So it's pretty sad.
Thank you for that. Again, we have so many wonderful questions. I just want to remind people in the audience that if we don't get to all of them, I sincerely apologize. We will get back to you with a written response. So bear with us here. I guess the next question I would ask is, let's see. I already answered the one about, and I'm sorry that I've taken some of these out of order. I'm trying to scroll through them on my phone as we're talking here. Uh, Here's one right up at the top here. Um, there's a person who said that they've been trying to pull together female officers since 2012, but received very negative feedback. There's no trust among us. Any recommendations? I don't know whether that means there's no trust among us, meaning female officers, or no trust among law enforcement officers in general. So, but I would say that don't give up if you're trying to pull together a group. I think that's really important. That's exciting. So I would say be persistent. Unfortunately, I think in policing, with all the pressures of the job, sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. I know I've had some experiences in my own career as we rise through the ranks when there's a bit of backstabbing or jealousy. I think that occurs in any profession, by the way. But I always have little time for that. I think we all need to support each other. I think it's incredibly important. The job is tough enough, and we've seen the stressors, and we've seen the importance of wellness and in policing. Finally, wellness is being acknowledged as important. So I would encourage you to try to persevere and develop your support group and bring people together. Have any of the other panelists here had challenges in organizing groups within your own departments? Sheriff Rivera?
Yes, here in Utah, when we tried to form the Utah Women in Law Enforcement when we first started, it wasn't that women didn't want to join. They were fearful that their male police chief would not support it. And we found that that was occurring. So what we did is we went out and explained to the police chiefs what the program really was. They thought it was just a group of women coming together to complain about the workplace. And once we educated them, we got more support. We actually invited them to some of our trainings, and we explained how the training would benefit their agencies and the support that we were giving women. So there is that challenge, but you just have to keep trying and go around, like meet with police chiefs and trying to get their support first.
Thank you for that. I want to thank Elizabeth, who sent in the message that in her jurisdiction, they've established a public safety task force, and that she recommended to the mayor that the event would be watched by members and volunteers. So thanks for that. I hope that we've provided, some insight. I think we should talk just a little bit more about where we're headed now in terms of the future of policing and how important it really is to get it right. I know the time has passed so quickly. When I first saw that we had a 2-hour event, I thought, are we going to have enough material to cover in 2 hours? But now I've discovered that we could probably do a few days of responses to some of these great questions. But I think it will probably be wrapping up soon. So let's just talk a little bit. And again, this truly is a lightning round. Okay. I'm going to ask all of you if there's one thing you could do right now to improve community trust and policing in your community. What is that you would do? Chief Lees.
I think one word is listen. I think we do more talking and more research and more what we think they need, but we need to listen. As part of my Chiefs Community Advisory Board, I meet with a very diverse group, and I've gotten some great, excellent ideas from that group just by listening. Thank you.
Boy, really good point. I think that's a point really well taken. What's more important than that? Listening carefully and hearing those community voices. Sheriff.
Yes.
What's the one thing?
For me, I would say communicate more active with the community. For me, it's a challenge because I do have 2,000 employees and run 2 separate departments. So trying to find time to do that communication, that's what I would improve on.
Great. And important to encourage all of your members to communicate.
Absolutely.
Effectively. Chief Kennedy.
I would say engage them. And what I mean by that is you can't expect them to come to you. You have to go to them. And so when there's not trust also, they're never going to come to you. So you have to find ways to get out there and engage your community.
Chief Hawkins.
I'm going to double down on not just listening, but listening for understanding and then empowering more members of the police department, not just officers, more members of the police department to listen and then educate themselves. And then from listening, from understanding what they're saying.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. Marshall Chavez.
I would say, enhancing our messaging. Historically, I don't think we're as great at promoting who we are. In this country this year, we all experienced a lot of tension, and it was different at the state level than it was at the federal level. I know here in Albuquerque, we had a lot of political infighting with our governor and our mayor and the feds. And it was just really important for us to make sure they know what that means to be the feds. We live here. We're raising our families here. And so anyway, my big thing would be we need to do a better job of making sure our communities know who we are as law enforcement officers, that we are part of this community. So we're invested as people, just as we are as a law enforcement component.
Great, thank you. We have 2 more questions here that I'd like to get in under the wire because I think they're really important. We've recently seen a number of female chiefs who've resigned or basically been forced out of their jobs. How do you think this affects I mean, I'm really concerned about this, and I think we should continue this dialogue. And I will encourage NAWLEE to do that. I think there's such a disincentive for good people right now to pursue leadership positions because it's such a toxic environment. So I totally I appreciate that question, and that was from Dorothy at John Jay College, and we would love to continue that dialogue with you in the academic environment. But I think that NAWLEE should lead the charge as well. You know, how do we encourage good people to lead, particularly women, when the environment can be so toxic? And the other one is how do you deal with people in your department that say you only got your position because you're a female? Well, I would just roll my eyes and not pay too much attention to them at all. I think if you work really hard and you show that your commitment and you're authentic in your engagement with people, most people will respect you. And it's usually my Irish grandmother used to use a term called the begrudgers, meaning the jealous people. You know, they're the ones that'll make comments like that, and I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about them. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue and to continue discussions like this. It's really, really important that we come together and harness our resources and think about the future. And I totally agree that this has to be thoughtful dialogue. We have to engage with our communities, with our elected officials, so that we're not responding to knee-jerk reactions. We're actually having thoughtful discussion about the future of policing, because our communities are counting on us to do that. So thank you all panelists for engaging in this very, very thoughtful dialogue today. And once again, thank you to my friends at NAWLEE, and thank you to our friends at the Law Enforcement Museum for providing us all with this opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Encore. We hope you learned something from this past museum program, and will check out our full selection of museum programs using the link in this episode description. Be sure to check back with us on March 27th for this month's episode of Law and Disorder. Thanks again, and stay safe. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.